Hi everyone, I am Heather. This paper is going to focus on the Safe Water Act and the amendments specifically made during 2011 in regards to lead, how they affected Flint and the Flint water crisis. So this is a very important issue because over 100,000 residents in Flint have contaminated water. The Safe Drinking Water Act requires the EPA to determine the level of contaminants in drinking water to make sure that there's no health effects and it's safe for everybody to drink within a certain margin. So these non-enforceable health goals based solely on possible health risk are called maximum contaminant level goals, so MCLGs. The EPA has set the maximum contaminant level goal for lead in drinking water at 0 because lead is never safe. It's toxic metal that can be harmful to humans, even at the lowest exposure levels. So if lead is persistent and it'll bioaccumulate in the body over time, you can't really get rid of it unless you do a very specific procedure, and it can cost a lot of money. So policymakers should care about this issue because this crisis has proved that there needs to be more thorough rules and guidelines established to prevent a crisis like this from ever happening again. In Flint specifically, everybody was affected, especially young children, infants, and pregnant women and their fetuses because they're more vulnerable to lead because physical and behavioral effects of lead occur at low exposure levels in children rather than adults. So, just the littlest bit is going to affect a child a lot more than an adult would. And a dose of lead in children has been linked to, even like a small dose has been linked to damage in the central peripheral nervous system with learning disability, shorter stature, so they're not going to grow to where they should have, and then impaired hearing, impaired formation and function of the blood cells. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, recommends that public health actions be initiated when the level of lead in the child's blood is 5 micrograms or more. And it's important to recognize all the ways that children can be exposed to lead. It's not only in water, it can be paint, dust, soil, air, and food, but this paper, our presentation, is focusing more on the water. If the level of lead in a child's blood is at or above the CDC action level of 5 micrograms per deciliter, it may be due to lead exposures from a combination of sources. But what we're talking about again today, like I said, is more specific to the water. The EP estimates that drinking water can make up to 20% or more of a person's total exposure to lead. That information, I believe, was wrote before the Flint water crisis, however. Infants who consume mostly mixed formula can receive 40% to 60% of their exposures of lead from drinking water. So it's a huge increase, and that's why it's so important right now for any children who are under the age of 6 to only drink bottled water. They're saying it's not even safe for them to drink the filtered water because they're so much more susceptible. So children, like I said, even the low levels in their blood with lead can result in behavior and learning problems, lower IQ, hyperactivity, slowed growth, hearing problems, and anemia. And then in rare cases, ingestion of lead has caused seizures, coma, and even death. For pregnant women, lead can accumulate in their bodies over time, where it is stored in the bones along with calcium, and then during pregnancy, it's released from the bones as maternal calcium, and it's used to help form the bones of the fetus. This is particularly true if a woman does not have enough dietary calcium. So if they, aren't properly eating or not getting the right nutrition, the calcium is going to draw from their bones. And if they have lead in them, that's going to go towards the fetus. Lead can also cross the placental barrier, exposing the fetus to lead. This can result in serious effects to the mother and her developing fetus, including reduced growth of the fetus, premature birth, and more. Also, lead can be transmitted through breast milk, so breastfeeding moms are told to only drink bottled water as well. And then for adults, lead is also harmful to them If they're exposed to lead, they can have cardiovascular effects, increased blood pressure, incidence of hypertension, as well as decreased function and problems with the reproduction system. So this problem has been known for over a year now. Everybody has been pointing fingers at each other from the local, state, and federal, even national level. No one has really taken responsibility for it, which is sad because it was a fail at multiple different levels of organizations. The federal package put together by Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters will provide the city with over $100 million in funding through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund System and $70 million in credit subsidies from the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Authority. The federal package would also give Flint access to $50 million for additional public health programs and services. Governor Snyder has asked for $127 million for water infrastructure, health resources, children, family service, economic renewal through supplemental budget bills that are rebelling, that people have rebelled against. Not everybody agrees with those. But the public now mistrusts the policymakers, which is very understandable because they failed at so many levels. So it's very important that the policymakers make sure that they set rules that will be followed and will make the citizens feel safe again, and make sure that there are policies in place to protect the citizens to make sure something like this never happens again. The American Red Cross, church groups, community groups, physicians, especially the medical community, as well as a professor from Virginia Tech, are all huge advocates and bringing media attention to this problem. President Obama released a state of emergency for Flint and has sent FEMA to coordinate all disaster relief efforts, which have the purpose of alleviating the hardship and suffering caused by the emergency in Genesee County, specifically Flint. FEMA can provide up to $5 million in federal aid to provide help with water filters, and other items for up to 90 days to residents whose water has been contaminated since the switch, which was in 2014. So the first set of regulations is the foundation upon which state, local, and citizen participation begins. The Act places the primary responsibility for enforcement and supervision of public drinking water supply systems and sources of drinking water clearly upon the state. So there's laws at the federal level, but then there's placing more of the responsibility at the state level. And this is just very frustrating because the state